My name is Tim Neuenschwander. I'm the president of the McFarland Chamber of Commerce, and I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight to the 2014 McFarland Citizen of the Year banquet. I'd like to take a moment to thank the Shared Table Combo for the music and entertainment they provided during our social hour. And before we get started with the formal presentation, I'd like to begin by also honoring the past Citizens of the Year who were able to attend tonight. So if you could please stand as I say your name. Larry Chapman. Al Wheeler. Lorraine Harried. Meg Nielsen. She sat down fast, but you'll get to see a lot more of her later, so. Pat Kennedy. Ken Brost. Brian Utter. And Colleen McCormick. We thank you all for taking time to come to tonight's presentation, and thank you again for all of the support and work that you put into our community. With that, I would like to introduce Pastor Kelly Schmidt, who will provide us with tonight's invocation. Kelly?
Greetings to you all this evening. I'm Pastor Kelly Schmidt, and together with Pastor Tim Dean, who sends his blessings tonight as well, I have the joy of being one of the pastors to the community of McFarland Lutheran Church, which includes Jane and Wes. So I know tonight is about Jane being named Citizen of the Year for McFarland, but you should know that she and Wes just returned with other missionaries from McFarland Lutheran Church to a mission trip in Puerto Rico. And I only bring this up to highlight that Jane's kindness is not limited to this village. So you are a blessing to us, Jane. So it's an honor to be here tonight, and I invite you to join us in prayer. God of life, we give you thanks for this wonderful reason to get together, to celebrate Jane and the many ways she has gifted this community and your creation. Please continue to bless her and her dedication to helping those she meets. Bless the meal we are about to enjoy in the hands that helped prepare it. Be with us this evening as we share stories and enjoy this time together. In your holy name we pray. Amen. Thank you.
And with that, we will begin dinner. And again, Jane would like to take this time real quick to just say thank you for your service, and we'll be looking forward to hearing a lot more about you in just a bit. So.
Good evening. If I could have your attention, please. My name is Meg Nielsen, and I will be doing the next part of the program. It's an honor and a pleasure for me to do that, to be here tonight, to celebrate Jane, to honor her for her contribution to the village of McFarland and the town of Dunn. And first I'd like to do some introductions here. I'll introduce the people at the head table. You've already met Pastor Kelly down at the end, Kelly Schmidt, and her husband, Mike. And then we have Representative Rob Call and his wife, Jennifer. And then Village President Brad Zaboter. Now and then we have in the middle table here, family and our Citizen of the Year. Jane and Wes, why don't you just stand so we have just a chance to look at you. And I think since people are sort of far back in the room, why don't you stand as I call your name. I'll have Deb Knoll stand. She's from Dallas Center in Iowa, Jane's sister. And we'll hear more from her later. She was kind enough to share some stories with us. So watch out, Jane. And then on the other side of the table from Jane is Wes and Jane's oldest daughter, Sarah. here all the way from Florida. Is that right? Yep. And then Katie and Sean and your family, will you stand? Katie is the younger daughter, and her husband Sean, and her sons Liam and Finn. And then down at the end of the table, next to Sean, is Rachel Audie Davis, I believe. And she was, stand up, go ahead. She's a McFarland girl. And Jane described her as being their first horse daughter. You can ask Jane about that later. And then on the other side of the table from them, if you would stand to Karen and John Curry. They too are special friends of Jane and Wes, I think former teachers and also horse lovers and horse people. Horses have played an important part. Well, one of them is. Okay. All right. And before I start this presentation tonight, I want to thank Judy St. Clair and her daughter Nikki for putting together the PowerPoint presentation. Judy's sitting up here, and we'll hear from her later and see her a little bit later too. And also for Katie and Deb for sharing some of their stories and comments, which I sort of used and sort of not exactly in their own words, but sometimes in their own words. So you know, it's all in the deal. So, all right, I think we are ready to begin. If I have not forgotten anything, and maybe we'll hear a little bit from Sarah later. I'm not sure about that. So, we're starting tonight with a rare photo of our Citizen of the Year, Jane Licht. Now, it's a rare photo because Jane, in this photo, is sitting still. She is not holding a broom and sweeping or a piece of sandpaper and sanding. She's not wielding a paintbrush or any of those things. She's actually sitting still on the steps of the Larson house, the place that means so much to her and that has consumed so much of her time and energy during the past couple of years. In a recent story in the McFarland Thistle, Jane was quoted as saying that when she was growing up, her mother told her she could do anything she put her mind to. And luckily, Jane believed her. What Jane has done as head of the Larson House Planning Committee is proof that her mother was probably right. And here's a picture of Jane and the Larson House Planning Committee standing outside the house with the Larson House sign, the museum sign. Now, Jane has worn many hats as head of this committee, and I mean that both literally and figuratively. Not only did she wear one of those beautiful Victorian hats while walking in the Family Festival Parade in support of the Chocolate Fest, but she actually made most of them. Now, the women's hats, not the men's. But Jane has done everything from making hats to scraping and sanding spindles and spandrels for the porch, to working on the garden and the landscaping, but just hang on a second. We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here, so in order to get to know Jane, to really know her, we have to kind of go back in time and see what forces shaped her into the dynamic person that she is today. Here's a picture of Jane with her parents, Betty and Alvin Balch. And Jane credits her parents with shaping her ideals at a very early age. In fact, you know, even from when she was this age, Jane was a good girl, right from the start. She actually waited for her dad to come home from the Navy at the end of World War II before she started to walk. By that time, she was 16 months old. Now, knowing Jane, she was probably getting really, really tired of sitting around by that time, but she waited. And when her dad came home, she took her first steps right into the waiting arms of this handsome stranger in a Navy uniform. Oh, there's Jane. She grew up in Iowa, but we won't hold that against her. This was 1951, and when she was a little girl, Jane enjoyed many privileges. Her mom took her to dance class and swimming lessons, and she was in Brownie Scouts. By the time Jane got to be in 6th grade, she already knew that she wanted to be a 6th grade teacher when she grew up. But even as a child, I'm told, Jane possessed a very strong sense of justice and fearlessness. When she found out that her younger brother Al was being bullied by a neighborhood kid, she marched down to the kid's house, knocked on the boy's door, and when he came to answer it, she showed him her fist and she said, "It's not okay to intimidate my little brother." And she told him if he didn't stop, she was going to punch him right in the face. And I guess he never bothered Al again. That's unusual for Jane, though. She doesn't usually do that. Jane was the oldest of 5 siblings in her family, and this photo, I think, was from 1953. Some of them hadn't even been born yet. This is her brother Al and her younger sister Debbie, who was 7 years younger than she is. There's quite a range in age in the family, and as Jane will often mischievously and quite honestly tell you, she was the only planned child. All the rest of them were accidents. And this is Jane at age 12. By that time, she was already honing skills as a teacher, a leader, and a moral guide. This is according to her sister Debbie. Now, apparently, Jane liked to put on puppet shows in a puppet theater that their dad had built for them. She wrote these elaborate plays about princes and princesses and villains, and then she would invite the neighborhood kids in to a performance, and everybody just loved it. But then there was this one Saturday, and Saturday was always a cleaning day at the Balch household, and when Debbie came up with the time-saving room cleaning technique, she decided to just go with it. She took all of her toys and her books and everything she closed and everything, she shoved it into her closet and she shut the door. And then she sat down to watch cartoons on TV. But it didn't take Jane too long to figure out what was going on. "Debbie," she said, "would you like to see a puppet show?" Well, Debbie thought, "Oh yeah, can't wait, my own puppet show." So before long, though, Debbie realized she had been foiled. Instead of the puppet show being about a beautiful princess, it was about a little girl who had disobeyed her mother by stuffing everything into her closet instead of cleaning her room. And she said, "Jane didn't yell at me or anything. She didn't tell her mother, but she got Deb's attention in her own sweet way." And here's Jane at her high school graduation picture. She doesn't look like a dreamer here, but again, Debbie said she was quite a dreamer, a daydreamer, no less. Whenever it was Jane's turn to wash dishes, Debbie said nobody else wanted to dry because Jane would be there. She'd be gazing out the window. She'd be washing the same dish over and over and over again, till finally somebody would go, "Jane, please finish the dishes." Well, being a dreamer isn't such a bad thing after all, especially when it's followed by action. And we can only wonder how many hours Jane spent washing her dishes this past year as she dreamed about the Larson house. And here's a picture of the whole family in 1969. And as you can see in the rather drastic range in age of the children, Jane may have been right. She was the only one that was planned. Well, here it is. Lovely wedding picture of a handsome couple. Jane and Wes met on the first day of freshman orientation at the University of Northern Iowa. Jane saw this tall, handsome young man with a nice smile, and he seemed to be noticing her as well. They were both upper elementary education majors, and they had many classes together. The handsome man was, of course, Wes Licht. Wes and Jane dated throughout most of their college days at UNI, and they were married on August 20th, 1966. Now, if any of you know Jane and Wes, and I'm sure most of you know them quite well, you know that they've always seemed to be very much in love. And there's a story about Jane and Wes when they were going on their honeymoon. They got married in Des Moines, and they were on their way to the Ozarks. But, you know, as newlyweds, they were going to stop at this little place kind of on the border between Iowa and Missouri for their first night. And they were almost to the Iowa border, and Wes was getting a little impatient. He looked over at Jane, and he put his hand on her knee. And he kind of smiled at her. She looked back, and she smiled at him, too. And then he moved his hand up just a little farther on her leg, grinned at her again. She turned back, and she grinned at him, too, and she said, "Oh, Wes, we're married now. You can go farther than that." So they drove all the way to Kansas City. With apologies to Ole and Lena, Wes. Here's a picture of Jane during her early years of teaching at Falk Elementary. Jane was influenced by this other lady, Catherine Charlson. Catherine became Jane's mentor and her friend, and she was one of the people who instilled in Jane a love of nature and of the environment. Jane credits this awakening to the respect for the land to a visit to the Aldo Leopold Shack in the fall of 1967. She and Wes were visiting the Charlsons at their cottage, and they hiked up to the Leopold Shack. It was a crisp October day. They sat on one of the benches, and they listened as Catherine read this quote from the Sand County Almanac. "There are those who can live without wild things, and those who cannot." It was an epiphany for them, and the beginning of a new understanding of their role as stewards of God's creation in the wider community of all interdependent living things. Here's a picture of Jane and her class at Falk Elementary back in the 1960s. Jane and Wes have always, they strike me as being the quintessential teachers. Even when Jane was a wife and a stay-at-home mom, she never stopped teaching. She helped out at the schools, she took groups of kids through Indian Mound Park, and she still, to this day, in the fall will lead classes through the McFarland Historical Society Museum. There's a lovely young couple. This is Jane and Wes with their daughters Sarah and newborn Katie in 1973. It was the same year that they moved into their house and their farm on County Trunk Highway AB. Jane says they were the perfect candidates to live in the town of Dunn. They loved the town of Dunn's moratorium on development and the town's plan to study natural resources and decide how to control urban growth. Reassured by those policies, they began planting tree seedlings and restoring a prairie, cleaning up the shoreline of their small pond. And here's Jane a few years later with Katie and Sarah on the steps of their house. Katie says that her mom always provided a happy childhood for them, keeping them busy with projects like planting a garden, exploring nature near the pond, or doing art. And I have to use Katie's own words here to tell you what she said about you as a mom. All the details were thought over, and we had tremendous freedom to play and learn. Mom was always aware of creating a framework where we could feel safe and yet be free to create and explore. End quote. Well, Jane was always a busy woman, but somehow in 1976, she found time to become an author. 1976 was the year that Jane and Barbara Houghton and I published the first edition of City of the Second Lake, A History of McFarland, Wisconsin. The project took several years of our time, inserted as it was between growing families and young children. And in 1997, with our families pretty much grown and gone, we updated and rewrote the book, publishing it in the softcover copy that you see here. And I'm just guessing, but I think probably if there's going to be a third edition, it's not going to be us. And by the way, that book, you can still get that book if you don't have a copy yet. It's at the McFarland Historical Society Museum.
Are you still getting royalties?
No. Anyone who knows Jane knows, ooh, I think I slipped something here. Yes, I did. Okay, here they are at Indian Mound Park. they were instrumental, along with Ruth and Conrad Yeager, in convincing the village of McFarland to establish a park to preserve Indian mounds at the top of the hill behind the middle school. And here they are supervising some students who were kind of restoring the mounds, I believe. They also are very dedicated to the quality of lakes, rivers, and marshes surrounding McFarland and throughout the town of Dunn. One of the ways that they helped people know about these resources was taking a group of 7th graders on no less than a 5-day canoe trip from Lake Mendota through the Yahara River and down to Lake Kiganza. Now, I always thought they probably could have found an easier way, but they didn't, and it was wonderful. So many kids learned so much, and I know that they loved taking them down the river. The Lichts have a prairie on their farm, and every couple of years they do a controlled burn to keep their prairie functioning as a prairie should. It's a great learning experience. It has taught many people, young and old, the reverence for prairies, including, I think, myself and Glenn and our family, and also including Katie, who says that she can still name most of the prairie plants that she learned about as a young person. Katie writes, "Mom taught me the details of my world so intimately that even now I desire to protect these things. Each tree, each place along our land holds a memory." Now, anybody who knows Jane knows that she has a slightly political side. In her impressive career, Jane has been elected Dane County Supervisor and also Register of Deeds, and probably some other things that I'm totally forgetting about here. In this first photo, she's campaigning in a parade, Wes at the helm there. And ever since I've known her, it seems like Jane has been stumping for, some candidate or some cause that she truly believes in. And if I ever wondered, gosh, who should I vote for in this election? Jane would be the first person I would ask because she would know. When Katie was growing up, she said that she knew her mom was political, but she thought all parents were like that. Well, of course they were. It wasn't until she started dating that Katie realized just how seriously her mom was taking her politics. Because after one particular young man came over and Katie introduced them, and then later on, Katie's going on and on about the good points of this young man, and finally Jane blurted out, "But Katie, is he a Democrat or a Republican? Do you know?" Katie also remembers that her mom's politics had a really sensitive side. And I just have to read you what Katie wrote about this. She sent me some emails, and I'm happy to share them with you. She writes this: "Mom was always instilling in us a sense of social justice, equality, and the need to take action if something wasn't right, whether it was protecting a piece of wetlands from the proposed Libby landfill, for which she became known, by the way, as the dump lady, or speaking up for a friend." Katie says, "When I was in middle school, it was popular to call things you didn't like gay. And after hearing me say this word in a derogatory way, Mom sat me down and explained why this bothered her tremendously. She spoke of people she worked with and admired on the Dane County Board who were intelligent, hardworking, and kind, and who also just happened to be gay. I'm ever thankful for her clear conversation, which came from the vantage point of loving others, not judging others. She really made me consider the harm that senseless words can bring." End quote. Now, Jane has been Wes's right-hand person in many parades and competitions, and while they're all dressed up and looking pretty here, I'm pretty sure that I've seen Jane behind the buggy with a bucket and a shovel, humbly cleaning up the environment, shall we say. One of the Licht's pastimes, since Jane retired in 2007, has been giving sleigh rides on the snowy paths outside their farm. Wes drives the team. Jane tucks everybody in under the warm lap robes. And even though in these pictures she's enjoying a nice ride, in the sleigh. That isn't what she usually does. Usually, Jane is the one who tucks everybody in, Wes takes off, and then she runs to this vantage point where she can get the perfect photo of the participants so that they have something to take home with them. And of course, when the guests arrive back at the house, there's hot chocolate, a cozy fire, and warm hospitality waiting for everyone. Okay, now this photo needs a little setup. We all know Jane would do just about anything to help out, and we've heard from her sister how she liked to make up stories and do puppet shows. And some of us know that Jane likes to walk in the parade dressed in a long skirt and a beautiful hat. But there was this one time when maybe it was just a little bit over the top. It happened at a horse event, and it was like a circus parade theme. And let's just say there was this clown, which you can see there, and there was somebody in the top hat, the ringmaster, and then there was Priscilla the gorilla, complete with the pink tutu and the ballet moves. Knock, knock. Who's there? Gorilla. Gorilla who? Gorilla my dreams. I love you. So sweet. That's the way she is. She said, I couldn't get anybody else to do it. Now, even though her performance as Priscilla didn't grant her any Oscars, Jane's performance in other areas has certainly gained her plenty of recognition over the years. In 1996, Jane was given the Dane County Natural Heritage Award for lifelong commitment to conservation and restoration of natural areas. Poet Robert Browning wrote, "Grow old along with me, for the best is yet to be, the last of life for which the first was made." And we know that one of Jane's greatest joys after her retirement from her post as Register of Deeds has been her grandsons Liam, shown here on the left, and Liam and Finn a few years later on the, I don't know if you're seeing it my way too, on the right. Jane and Wes love their grandchildren. They enjoy taking them on the horses, pushing them on the rope swing, picking tomatoes in the garden with them, and of course, fishing down at their lovely pond. And here they all are, celebrating Jane's birthday at the Green Lantern. You gotta admit, these two are still a really handsome couple. Even before the Larson house was purchased, Jane and Wes were busy helping out with the Chocolate Fest to raise money to make it happen. And so here we are. We've come full circle, as we often do in life. Jane is a woman of many talents. She has been a wife and a mother, a grandmother, an author, a gardener, a homemaker, a teacher, a community organizer, the dump lady, a Dane County Board Supervisor, Register of Deeds, and now Citizen of the Year. And while we recognize Jane for being all of these things in McFarland and Dunn, we also owe her our thanks for all she's accomplished in bringing about the speedy restoration of the Larson house. I'm pretty sure that with anybody else in charge, restoring that house would have taken 5 years, maybe 10. I'm on the committee, and that's what I expected at the very least. But I underestimated Jane. Sometimes we felt like we were on a chain gang. She never let up. There was a work day every week. Sometimes there were 2. I couldn't believe it. We painted. We scrubbed until we had to sit down. We took up carpet and washed walls. We even hauled dead cats out of the basement and the attic. Week after week, dozens of volunteers put on their grubby clothes and came over and helped out with the Larson house. And Jane was always there, inspiring excellence and attending to every small detail with great love. Everyone did what had to be done, no matter what. And it was in between work days. Jane was out in the community, and she was inviting people to become room donors to help fund the restoration process. To this day, I believe all the rooms have been claimed and named. Is that correct? Or pretty close. Except for one. Well, then there's opportunities in this room. And they each cost $10,000. And this has been all through the good graces of the good people of McFarland and the town of Dunn. Like being an eye closer at the sardine factory, restoring the Larson house was a dirty job, but somebody had to do it. And Jane never shirked the tough stuff. And now this is a true story. That first summer, when work on the Larson house was just beginning, it was the summer of 2012, and it was hot. That was the summer that it got hot in March, and it just stayed hot and dry and icky the whole summer. Well, that was the summer that Jane took on this nasty job of getting all the layers of old paint off of these spindles that you can just kind of barely see in the background on that one picture on the left-hand side there. She hand-dipped these things in like nasty chemicals and then, peeled off the ancient coats of paint. She worked outside in the intense heat in her backyard. She had to wear a face mask because, it was really hot and there were fumes and lead paint and all that other stuff. When she got all the paint off, she'd call Lee Ackley, and he would come over and get a batch and take them home and put them back together. Now the story goes that one day Lee called to see when Jane would be bringing over some more of the spindles. But Wes answered the phone. Lee said, "Can I talk to Jane?" And Wes, and this is true, Wes replied, "Just a minute, I think she's out in the backyard stripping." This will go down in Larson House lore. Well, Jane's mother told her she could do anything she set her mind to, and by golly, I think she did it. Her daughter Katie again shared some kind words with her, and this is what she said. "It has been no surprise that what seemed like an insurmountable mess of an old house has bit by bit been turned into a breathtaking piece of history for the entire community to enjoy. While Mom certainly didn't do it alone, she helped to create an organized process and direction for this project. When Mom puts her mind to getting something done, watch out. Just ask Dad if you don't believe me." I hope rebuilding this house museum inspires others in the community to keep alive the belief that big things can happen in small communities. Yes, they can, and we are grateful. So if you should see Jane sitting on the steps of the Larson house, count it a rare occasion because she seldom, if ever, sits still. And when she does, she's probably thinking, gazing off into the middle distance, daydreaming about that next project that needs to be done, or the next garden that needs to be planted, or the next endeavor that she could use her special gifts and talents to complete. In fact, though, when Judy St. Clair and I were putting this presentation together, we decided we couldn't leave you all with that peaceful picture of Jane just sitting there on those steps. We want your final view of Jane to reflect her as she truly is, a woman with infinite intelligence, superhuman strength, and the ability to leap tall buildings in a single bound. I give you Jane Licht, a superwoman and Citizen of the Year for 2014. We wanted you to be properly attired. There are boots too, but congratulations, Jane.
Sure.
Looks like something my daughter Sarah would make.
Yeah, you would make me wear something like that.
Well, Jane, I think there's a time now for a few other things. I believe you're next, right? Or no, we have some presentations to do first. So you can change into that if you want to, but okay. Well, let's commence. Are there any other special comments? Does anybody at the family table want to?
Well, can we clap for your presentation? 'Cause it was
I'm honored. Thank you. Just for the time being. And then I think you'll want to stay up here because we have some presentations. First off, I will introduce Brad Zaboter, Village President, and you can come up. And I don't know if I want to share the mic, or what do you think, Brian? Using the other one? Okay. They won't squeal at us? I'll turn you down. Thank you. Or I could mute.
It's dangerous, yes. Well, one of the great pleasures I have as village president is to be part of a celebration like this and have the opportunity to recognize and honor, on behalf of the village board, a member of our community who has contributed to making McFarland a better place to live. The Citizen of the Year event aims to highlight and acknowledge the exemplary dedication to service by a volunteer who has made outstanding contributions to our community. It has been said that success in life has nothing to do with what you gain in life or what you accomplish for yourself. It's what you do for others. Jane's selection as Citizen of the Year for 2014 recognizes her many contributions to the community, including co-authoring the book City of the Second Lake, History of McFarland, an involvement with the McFarland Historical Society, chairing the Larson House Planning Committee, her work to preserve and restore Native Indian mounds, and serving on the McFarland Library Board, just to name a few. Jane, like the citizens of the year before her, has set an inspiring example by contributing her efforts, skills, and knowledge to improving our quality of life in McFarland. So Jane, on behalf of the village board, I would like to present to you this proclamation, which was issued on Monday, March 31st, and to say thank you for all you have done for McFarland and to congratulate you on this prestigious award of being named Citizen of the Year.
And now, Representative Rob Call, would you come up, please?
Thank you. This is my second year coming here to this event, and it's one that my wife and I, she came to join me last year, really look forward to, because it's a great way to learn about a community, because you learn about its citizens, and obviously this being the Citizen of the Year. But I've known Jane longer. She just doesn't know it. I've been practicing law in Dane County since 1997, and a big part of my practice is real estate. And when I started, partners to help you learn, give you a couple of transactions, et cetera, and want you to learn on your own. And what I remember to this day, one of the partners said is, you will find that in Dane County, we've got a very helpful Register of Deeds. Their office is always responsive, will help you with things, et cetera. And he said, it wasn't always like that. This was 1997, I think, so you'd been there less than 10 years. But what Jane did as a public servant, came in and turned around that office, and she maybe not will say that publicly, pat herself on the back, but I can tell her the attorneys in Dane County credit her with some of the significant advancements, not just here in Dane County, but she pushed those statewide. And now I've got a real estate title and escrow office in addition to my law practice here in Dane County. I've had that for 10 years. And the seed she planted and the things she did there as a public servant have continued to grow. And it's still a great office to work with. Frankly, there's 72 counties. They're not all that great when we have to deal with them. And a lot of times if we have an issue or question in a different county, we lean on some of the folks in the Dane County Register of Deeds office to help us. And I just point that out because as a public official, it's not always easy. Wes had to make sacrifices. Your children had to make sacrifices. You put a lot into it. I can tell you, having come off this recent legislative session, being in the minority party up till 4 in the morning our last day, hitting the no button a lot on a lot of really bad votes, you can start to question your sanity of why you do things. Spending time away from me, my wife and 4 kids. But it's because you can see some of the positive results and the positive impacts you can have on people's lives. And what we saw here with this slide presentation, a lot of us already knew, but a lot of us learned about Jane, is that's the kind of person she is. Had a positive impact in the classroom, in her own family's lives, and us obviously here in the McFarland Dunn community, in the greater Dane County community through her Register of Deeds service. It's an honor for me to represent Jane and Wes in the state legislature, in the entire village of McFarland, town of Dunn. It's really been an honor and a pleasure to come to now the second year here to learn about great people here that have built this community and make it great. And for me, it's an inspiration to keep going out and doing it myself. And as a little reminder, we start circulating nomination papers April 15th, tax day. So that all starts up again, and I know Jane had to do that almost 20 years as Register of Deed herself. And for her to give that sacrifice and that commitment above and beyond what is expected of people, and now to see what she's doing here at the Larson House, et cetera. I was just down here a couple weeks ago to deliver a proclamation to the Historical Society. And I'm back down in McFarland in a couple of days for a different meeting. It'll feel odd to be driving here without a proclamation for Jane and Wes. It's become the norm now. I'll be looking at my blank passenger seat wondering what I've done wrong with not having my proclamation. But I'll be back here in May. I know we're going to have a grand opening for the Larson House, and it's a significant accomplishment. It's quite a task in a very quick timeline. It's very impressive. So I've got a proclamation here. Senator Miller could not make it tonight, but he and I both put this forward. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. I know that we want to spend some time listening to what Jane's got to say. But needless to say, it repeats a lot of what you've heard here today, which, frankly, we could have gone on and on. This could be a 3-page proclamation, given the accomplishments of Jane's professional and personal life. But needless to say, it's a very proud moment for me as your state representative, and I know for Mark too, to put this together, have this delivered. And I wish you all the best, and congratulations on being Citizen of the Year.
Tim Neuenschwander, the chamber president, is coming up. And Sarah, did you want to make some comments? Should we have her do that before you give your presentation?
You tell me. You want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
I think that would be a good idea because...
First of all, I'm sure I'm not the first person to realize this, but how wonderful is it that we get to honor somebody and find out about the many facets of their life before we're sitting there at the funeral. I mean, I sort of think, my gosh, if we could all have an opportunity to be, citizen of the year, citizen of the whatever, so we can learn about people. I've learned stuff that I didn't know, like the puppets. If anyone knows me, I do enjoy puppets, and I happen to have some here tonight. I never knew that you did puppet shows. You never mention it. It's so funny. So, okay, when I was thinking about coming to be here and what could I say, I realized that I had this perception that I've been carrying. It's kind of like the wounded teenager relationship with my mom that I just never could quite heal. And having this opportunity to reflect I found out that I've just been a little bit not so bright and seeing something, because what my feeling was is that, well, I connect with my dad, but I just don't really understand my mom. We just don't have that much in common. And then I realized, finally, thank you, that some of the attributes in myself that I value the most are due to my mother, living them as an example. So some of these are, she showed me that it's okay to be different, how to live outside of the box. I thought I was being neglected because she wasn't cooking meals and, doting on me, and she was just doing her life and being independent, running for office, all these things. She showed me, and by example, it's okay to know what you know. It's okay to have a voice. It's okay to communicate your opinions. And that probably didn't make her life very easy, having 2 daughters who felt free to communicate their opinions and were very independent. She taught me by example what it looks like to be a strong woman. She has a willingness to be stern when it's appropriate. She showed me what it looks like to have personal boundaries. What an example of what it looks like to be a contribution to your community. My mom showed me what it looks like to appreciate and cultivate friendships that last for years. She taught me by example and by guidance how to appreciate nature, how to be kind and compassionate to animals. Without her guidance, I don't know if we would have really gotten it right. There's a few cats. She had to show us how to be kind to cats. It doesn't always come natural for kids. And she really was an example of how much fun you can have with children, and that teaching and learning is fun, and you don't need to stop doing that ever in your life. She has a willingness to be wrong and the ability to say, oops, I made a mistake. And that is such a gift as an example, and just realizing, oh my gosh, my parents are people. She has a tremendous capacity to forgive. So the qualities of strength, independence, perseverance, and that this quality, I could only sum it up as roll up your sleeves and just do the work that you need to do. Those are great gifts. So, and finally, I'm 43, and I finally, just thought, oh my gosh, I'm just not really that bright in some ways, and I'm just now realizing that I do have so much in common with you. And I really appreciate your qualities. And by being true to yourself and what you wanted to follow, and not by just following what I thought exactly a mother should be like, you actually gave me everything that I really needed. So thank you.
Rest assured, Sarah, you weren't the only one surprised to hear about the puppets. So I do think we have our entertainment for next year booked. In all seriousness, Jane, it is an honor to be up here tonight, to have a privilege to present to you this award. As outlined by all the individuals before me, McFarland would not be what it is today without your efforts. Evident of every Citizen of the Year that we've been able to honor up here, you are the 27th person to receive this award, and you exemplify what makes our community strong and what ensures that we'll have a great future ahead of us. So on behalf of the McFarland Chamber of Commerce, Jane, I would like to present to you the plaque for the 2014 Citizen of the Year. Congratulations.
Wow. Well, first of all, thanks to the McFarland Chamber of Commerce and to Meg Nielsen for nominating me, and to Judy St. Clair and her daughter for creating the PowerPoint presentation, to Glenn Nielsen and his talented musicians for providing the lovely music. And I'm so glad that my family is able to share this evening. Rachel all the way from Woodbury, Minnesota, Rachel Audie Davis, and Sarah Licht from Florida, and she came back early just for this. And Sean Wilson and Katie Licht and their two fine sons, Liam and Finn, and to all of my many friends and people. It's just so overwhelming to look out and see all these friendly faces and realize this whole dinner is just made up of good friends. So it's wonderful. Thanks especially to my partner and my best friend, Wes Licht, who maybe should be up here. He certainly looks good tonight, doesn't he? He's all dressed up. Yeah, he cleans up nice. Well, as you can see by the presentation, there are quite a few things that I am very passionate about, and probably it was my role as chair of the Larson House Planning Committee that drew the attention of the Chamber of Commerce. And by the way, the grand opening is the 24th and 25th of May from 1 to 4, and you're all invited, so that'll be great. I suppose I'm supposed to say something profound at this point. And the first thing I want to say is that whatever gifts and talents I have to offer this world is because of the grace of God for giving me a healthy body and wonderful parents. Elvin and Betty Balch were the best parents you could imagine for their 5 children, kind and fun-loving, so very encouraging and interested in our little lives. They were great role models, always willing to help out others. And my siblings have grown up to be kind and generous and active members of their communities. When I was growing up, I was a voracious reader, and I had my heroes that were very important to me and to the world. Unfortunately, many of them were killed. But one of my heroes who lived a long and very productive life was Albert Schweitzer. Albert Schweitzer was born in Germany in 1875. He became a distinguished and widely respected theologian, philosopher, and organist. Then, after all he had accomplished, he went back to the university and became a medical doctor. He founded a hospital at Lambaréné, Gabon, in equatorial Africa, where he served the people there tirelessly and encouraged some of them to become nurses and doctors to continue his important work. He died at the age of 90 at his beloved hospital. Here are some of his words to live by. Success is not the key to happiness. Happiness is the key to success. If you love what you are doing, you will be successful. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. Never say there is nothing beautiful in the world anymore. There is always something to make you wonder, in the shape of a tree, the trembling of a leaf. Compassion, in which all ethics must take root, can only attain its full breadth and depth if it embraces all living creatures and does not limit itself to mankind. Seek always to do some good somewhere. Every man has to seek his own way to realize his true worth. You must give your time to your fellow man, for remember, you don't live in a world all of your own. Your brothers and sisters are here too. And my personal favorite is very simply, everyone can have his or her own Lamborghini. So, Liam and Finn, you might be the youngest ones here. I challenge you to find out more about Albert Schweitzer. He is someone you should really learn about. And for everyone here, you can have your own pursuits that you are passionate about. You can have your own Lamborghini. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. In my closing remarks, I would just like to take a few moments to thank some of the people who helped tonight happen. First, I'd like to thank our business sponsors who were generous enough to help make tonight a success. The staff and the owners here at the Maple Tree for continually hosting our event every year. Chris Olson, who provided the cake that we had for dessert. Tony Stolaric, who designed the program. All of the committee members on the Citizen of the Year who helped put this together. Brian Utter, who helps with the AV and technical. And all of you, again, thank you for coming and helping make this event a success. Now I'd like to hand it off back to Pastor Kelly Schmidt, who's going to provide our benediction.
Once again, thank you for the invitation to be here. It's been just a wonderful celebration and such joy, and I've really enjoyed getting to know more about you, Jane. So thank you for the invitation to being here. So please join me in a closing prayer. God of grace, we thank you for the joy of celebrating Jane, and we thank you for bringing us here safely tonight and for the blessing of being together. We give you thanks for all those who helped plan and prepare for tonight's event. Please grant us safe travel home and bless us as our day comes to a close. In your name we pray, amen. Thank you.
And thank you all, and have a good night. We hope to see you next year.